When my grandfather got out of the army, he worked the passenger lift in the Empire Hotel. He was always surprised to hear Americans call the lift an elevator. It seemed so unfancy to him. He loved the work, the people he'd meet, and the pay was good. He was really proud of his job. He worked the lift from noontime until midnight, Monday through Friday. He loved the conversations he'd have, especially with Colonel Saxby, for it was he that got my grandfather the job. The colonel insisted that a soldier was the perfect man for the job, as they are civil and businesslike. They had many a good joke and exchanged stories every time my grandfather took him up to his fourth-floor room, number 210. Now, the colonel always rode up the lift, but he never ever took the lift down. For some reason, he preferred to take the stairs down. My grandfather enjoyed hearing the small children chatter away as their parents pretended not to listen, and watching the ladies admire themselves in the mirrors on the way down to the lobby, having pleasant conversations with the older gentlemen who needed to sit and rest on the red velvet cushioned seats that adorned the lift. He really did love that job, until one evening in particular. He had just finished letting his last rider off at the second floor, as it was approaching 11:58. As was policy, my grandfather would shut down the lift at midnight, the end of his shift. He would then leave the keys at the front desk, where the desk clerk would store them for the morning shift man. As he was closing the lift and preparing to end his shift, midnight hit. Not a second later, the elevator buzzed. It was someone on the fourth floor needing assistance. Even though it was midnight, my grandfather figured maybe it was someone unaware of the rules, and he'd let it slip by just this once. As he opened the lift doors at the top of the fourth floor, however, he was surprised to see the colonel standing there, looking pale as ever, wrapped in a warm military jacket. It was an odd situation, for you see, the colonel hadn't used the lift at all in a few days, as he'd been ill, and he never, ever took the lift down. He only rode it up. "I'm glad to see you're feeling better, sir," my grandfather said. The colonel didn't even look at him. He said nothing and stepped into the lift. It was a very uneasy ride down, as my grandfather felt too awkward to make any small talk, as the colonel hadn't even made eye contact with him or acknowledged his presence. So he figured he better leave well enough alone and just take him down. He dropped him off at the lobby and watched him as he left, walking out the front door and into the cold winter's night, never acknowledging his presence, never saying goodnight, never even saying hello. It was as if he was in a trance. Grandfather walked his keys over to the front desk and spoke to Ryan, the clerk. Good thing he's got a warm coat on. Ryan, who was still staring after Colonel Saxby, says, "Yes, it's quite odd that he be going out into such cold weather, and this late at night, as I've heard he's been quite ill." 2 minutes later, a man with a briefcase walked rushedly through the door and straight towards the lift. "I'm sorry, sir, the lift is shut down for the evening," Grandfather called to him. The man stomped his foot and glared at him. "Nonsense. It's a matter of life and death. Take me upstairs to the 4th floor at once." Grandfather took the keys back and did as he was told. As they reached the 4th floor, Grandfather asked who was so sick. "A man named Colonel Saxby. He's gravely ill," said the man. "Oh, no, sir," Grandfather said. "You must be mistaken. I've just taken him downstairs about 5 minutes ago, and he went out for the evening. The front desk clerk and I saw him leave." The man was about to speak when a woman in a nurse uniform walked out of the colonel's room, room 210. "No worse, I hope?" the man said. "I'm afraid it's bad news," the nurse said. "He died 5 minutes ago." "That's impossible," Grandfather exclaimed. "I'm telling you, he rode down the lift 5 minutes ago." "Oh, for goodness sakes," the nurse said. "Come see for yourself," and led him into the room. There, on his bed, was the colonel, still wearing his coat, pale as a sheet, white as a ghost, staring straight ahead, the same expression he'd had on his face as he stood in the lift, ignoring my grandfather. My grandfather refused to help carry the colonel downstairs and quit his job on the spot.